All right, so you know how we love to really dig into a topic, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, get ready because today we're diving deep into the world of pharma marketing.
Sounds interesting.
And specifically, we're going to unpack how these companies segment their customers to make sure their marketing is, well, super effective.
Ah, segmentation, the
Yeah.
classic marketing challenge.
Exactly. And for pharma, it's a little different than, say, selling sneakers or something.
Right, because your customer isn't necessarily the person taking the drug.
Bingo. It's all about those healthcare providers, the doctors who are actually writing the prescriptions.
Makes sense.
So we've got this awesome lecture from an MBA course. And of course, we snagged the audio and the slides so we can really break it down.
Nice. Always good to have visuals.
Plus, we've got a couple of articles from some industry experts to add even more context.
Cool. So what's the mission for this deep dive?
Well, by the end of this, you'll have a crystal clear understanding of how pharma companies figure out who to target with their marketing efforts and why it matters.
I'm all ears.
And trust me, this stuff gets pretty wild.
Oh.
Like, did you know there are companies out there that literally track every single prescription a doctor writes?
Wow, really?
Seriously. And we'll even touch on how AI is starting to play a role in all of this. Like, imagine AI actually suggesting the best ways to connect with each doctor. Crazy, right?
That's next level.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Right.
Back to the basics.
To kick things off, why don't you give us a quick overview of pharma marketing? What makes it so different from other industries?
Okay, well, I think the biggest difference is who the customer really is.
Right. We were just talking about that.
In most industries, you're trying to reach the end consumer, the person who's actually buying the product.
Like if you're Coca-Cola, you want to convince people to buy a Coke, right?
Exactly. But in pharma, it's not so simple.
Yeah, you can't just run a TV commercial and tell people to go ask their doctor for a specific drug.
Exactly. For most drugs, there's no direct-to-consumer advertising allowed. So pharma companies have to focus their marketing efforts on healthcare professionals, those HCPs.
The doctors, nurses, pharmacists, anyone who can influence prescribing decisions.
And the lecture really drove that point home.
Absolutely. Winning over those prescribers is the name of the game.
It's like they're the gatekeepers to the patients who actually need the medication.
Precisely. And that's why understanding these HCPs is so crucial for pharma marketers.
But things are changing, right?
Hmm?
The professor mentioned that the whole landscape of pharma marketing has been shaken up in recent years.
Oh, yeah, big time.
What's driving that change?
Well, a lot of it has to do with technology, especially the rise of digital channels.
Right. Everything's going digital these days.
And the pandemic really accelerated that trend in pharma.
Makes sense. Doctors were suddenly doing a ton of virtual appointments, and everyone was relying more on online information.
Exactly. So pharma companies had to adapt, and fast.
They couldn't just rely on those traditional methods like in-person sales calls anymore.
Nope. They had to figure out how to reach doctors online, through emails, virtual platforms, webinars, all sorts of new channels.
It's like the whole industry had to go through a digital transformation overnight.
Pretty much. And at the same time, patients are becoming way more proactive in their healthcare.
I could totally relate to that. I mean, how often do you Google your symptoms before you even calling the doctor?
All the time. And now you've even got AI chatbots and apps that can provide basic medical advice.
It's crazy how much information is out there now.
So patients are coming to their doctors armed with more knowledge, which is definitely changing the dynamic.
Okay, so we've got this changing landscape, a whole new world of digital tools, and patients who are more informed than ever.
It's a lot to keep up with.
So let's put on our marketer hats here.
Yeah.
Let's say we're on a pharma marketing team, and we've got this amazing new drug that we're trying to get doctors to prescribe.
Okay, I'm game. What do we need to know about these doctors to make sure our drug is a success?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, because you've got to convince those doctors that your drug is the best option for their patients.
Exactly. And the lecture highlighted some key questions that every pharma marketer needs to ask.
Okay, hit me with those questions.
Well, first up, prescribing habits.
So, like, are they the type of doctor who's always eager to try the latest and greatest treatments?
Yeah, those early adopters who are always on the cutting edge.
Or are they more cautious, preferring to stick with tried and true medications that they've been using for years?
Because those are two very different types of doctors, and you'd probably approach them in different ways, right?
Absolutely. You'd tailor your message and your marketing materials to resonate with their specific approach to prescribing.
And the lecture slides had another big question. Treatment priorities.
What do they mean by that?
It's all about understanding what matters most to each doctor when they're treating their patients.
Okay, so, like, are they super focused on minimizing side effects?
Yeah, or maybe they prioritize long-term outcomes over short-term relief.
Or maybe they're really concerned with patient satisfaction and quality of life.
Exactly. All of those factors can influence which medications they choose to prescribe.
So, as a marketer, you'd need to really understand those priorities and highlight the aspects of your drug that align with them.
It's like you're speaking their language, addressing their specific concerns.
Makes sense. Anything else on that list of key questions?
Oh yeah, this one's a biggie. Communication style.
Oh, I can see where this is going.
It's not just about showing up at the doctor's office anymore.
Right. Especially with all the digital stuff we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Some doctors might still prefer that face-to-face interaction,
The good old-fashioned sales call.
but others might be glued to their inboxes.
Email all day long.
Or maybe they're active on online forums and medical communities.
So you've got to figure out where each doctor hangs out online and how they prefer to receive information.
And then you can tailor your communication strategy accordingly.
Yeah. Makes sense. You don't want to waste time and resources on channels that aren't effective for a particular doctor.
And that brings us to the final big question.
Okay, I'm ready. What is it?
Resource allocation.
Ah, that's where the rubber meets the road. You've got to figure out how to get the most bang for your buck.
Exactly. Marketing budgets and sales teams aren't unlimited.
So how do you make sure you're reaching the right doctors in the most effective way possible?
Bingo. And that's where segmentation comes in.
Right, we were talking about that at the beginning.
It's all about dividing those doctors into different groups based on various factors so you can tailor your approach.
So instead of treating every doctor the same.
You can create targeted campaigns that are much more likely to resonate.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together.
The professor introduced this super helpful tool called the segmentation matrix.
Segmentation matrix sounds intriguing. What's that all about?
Ready to dive into it?
Absolutely, let's break it down.
Okay, so picture a 2x2 grid.
All right, got it.
One axis is all about potential.
Potential for what?
Potential for prescribing your type of drug.
Oh, so like how many prescriptions could this doctor realistically write for a drug in this category?
Exactly. And the other axis is all about adoption.
Adoption meaning like how many prescriptions are they actually writing for your specific brands?
You got it. So you're basically mapping out doctors based on how much business they could bring you and how much they're already giving you.
Interesting. So where do we go from there?
Well, this matrix creates 4 distinct segments of doctors.
4 different types of customers, basically.
Exactly. And each segment requires a different marketing approach.
Okay, I'm ready. Walk me through those 4 segments.
Okay, first up, you've got the dream team.
The dream team.
The doctors who are both high potential and high adoption.
Oh, so they're already prescribing a lot of your drugs and they have the potential to do even more.
Bingo. These are your superstars, the ones you really want to nurture.
Makes sense. You want to keep those doctors happy.
Exactly. Then you've got the doctors who are high potential but low adoption.
So they could be prescribing a lot, but they haven't really jumped on board with your specific products yet.
Right. This is where you see a huge opportunity for growth.
But also a challenge, right? You've got to figure out how to win them over.
For sure. And then you've got the doctors who are low potential but high adoption.
Okay, so they might be loyal to your brands, but their overall prescribing volume is lower.
Yeah, maybe they have a smaller patient population, or they specialize in an area where your drugs aren't as commonly used.
So it's about maintaining those relationships, but maybe not investing as much time and resources as you would with the superstars.
Exactly. It's about being efficient with your efforts.
Makes sense. And what about the last segment?
Ah, the low potential, low adoption group.
So these doctors aren't really prescribing much in your drug category at all?
Right. Maybe they specialize in something completely different, or they just haven't had much exposure to your brands.
So they're not really your target audience?
Not necessarily. They might not be your main focus, but it's still worth keeping an eye on them.
Okay, just in case their prescribing habits change or something.
Exactly. You never know when a doctor might suddenly become more relevant to your marketing efforts.
So we've got these 4 segments all neatly laid out in this matrix.
It's a super helpful tool for visualizing your target audience and understanding how to approach each group.
But I have to ask, how do you actually gather the data to place doctors into these segments in the first place?
Yeah, that's the tricky part.
Like, are you just sending out surveys to every doctor in the country?
It's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah. Spill the beans. How do they do it?
Well, get this. The professor mentioned this technique called RCPA.
RCPA. What's that stand for?
Retail Chemist Prescription Audit.
That sounds pretty intense.
It is. Basically, companies actually send people out to pharmacies near a doctor's office.
Wait, seriously?
Yep, they literally hit the pavement.
But what are they doing at these pharmacies?
They're gathering data on how many prescriptions for specific drugs are being filled there.
Whoa. So they can see which doctors are writing the most prescriptions for certain medications?
Exactly. And they can track those trends over time.
It's like a real-world snapshot of what's actually happening in the market.
It's a pretty wild method, but it can be super effective.
I can imagine. But what about privacy concerns?
That's a great question, and it's something that pharma companies are very sensitive to.
I would hope so. They can't just be snooping around in people's medical records.
They're not. It's important to understand that this RCPA data is aggregated.
Aggregated?
Yeah, so they're not looking at individual prescriptions tied to specific patients.
Oh, so it's more about overall trends and patterns in prescribing behavior.
Exactly. It's all anonymized and used to understand market dynamics.
Okay, that makes sense. It's not about identifying individual patients. It's about seeing the bigger picture.
Right. And while RCPA is still a valuable tool, the lecture also emphasized that it's increasingly being complemented by digital data sources.
Right, because everything's going digital these days.
So in addition to those good old-fashioned pharmacy visits, pharma companies are now tapping into data from online pharmacies and electronic health records.
I can see how that would be super valuable.
It's a goldmine of information about prescribing habits.
But it's not just about collecting all this data, right?
No, you've got to make sense of it all.
And turn it into actionable insights that can inform your marketing strategy.
Exactly. And that's where the really interesting stuff starts to happen.
So tell me, what's the next step? What do you do with all this data once you've got it?
Well, this is where we go beyond just crunching numbers.
Oh! What else is there?
It's time to get into the minds of those doctors.
Get into their minds.
Well, not literally,
Okay, good.
but it's about understanding their motivations and preferences on a deeper level.
Going beyond just how many prescriptions they write.
Exactly. That's where this idea of doctor personas comes in.
Doctor personas. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
So it's kind of like creating a profile for each type of doctor in your target audience.
Like a little avatar that represents a certain segment of your market.
Exactly. And each persona has specific characteristics, motivations, and communication preferences.
So it's not just about their prescribing habits anymore.
Right. It's about understanding what makes them tick.
So give me an example. What are some of those characteristics you might consider when building these personas?
Well, one big thing is their attitude toward new treatments.
Right, some doctors are always eager to try the latest and greatest, while others are more cautious.
Exactly. And that's a key piece of information for a pharma marketer.
Because you tailor your message differently depending on how receptive they are to new ideas.
And you'd also consider things like their preferred communication channels.
So, like, do they prefer emails or phone calls?
Yeah, or maybe they're super active on online forums and social media.
You might even look at their professional development habits.
Like, do they regularly attend conferences and read medical journals?
Or are they more focused on practical tips and tricks that they can use in their day-to-day practice?
Exactly. All of these insights can help you create much more targeted and effective marketing approaches.
It's about painting a complete picture of each doctor as a person, not just a prescriber.
Exactly. And the more detailed your personas are, the better equipped you'll be to connect with them on a deeper level.
This is all incredibly valuable information.
But I have to ask, how does it all translate into action? Like, what does a pharma marketing manager actually do with all of these insights?
It's all well and good to understand these concepts, but how do you actually put them to work in the real world?
Yeah, that's the key question.
Right. How do you take all this complex information and turn it into a real-world marketing plan?
Let's imagine for a second that we've done all the analysis, we've built our segmentation matrix, and we've got these beautifully crafted doctor personas.
All right, we're all set up and ready to go.
So what do we do next?
I'm all ears.
Oh, the lecture gave a great example using 4 hypothetical doctors.
Okay, so they walked us through how you'd approach each doctor based on their segment and their persona.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating to see how the marketing plan changed depending on the doctor.
So tell me, how would you approach those different types of doctors?
Okay, so for those high-value doctors, the ones who are both high potential and high adoption.
Ah, the superstars we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. You'd probably go all out with a multi-channel approach.
Meaning you'd hit them from all angles.
Pretty much. You'd send them personalized emails, maybe have your sales reps give them a call.
You might even invite them to exclusive webinars or events.
Yeah. And maybe even have a medical science liaison pay them a visit.
It's all about building a strong relationship and keeping them engaged with your brand.
And for those high potential but low adoption doctors,
The ones you're trying to win over.
you'd probably focus on education and persuasion.
So, like, providing them with more information about your products and why they're the best option.
Exactly. And you'd tailor that information to their specific concerns and priorities.
So if a doctor is really focused on patient outcomes, you'd highlight the clinical trial data that supports your drug's effectiveness.
And if they're concerned about side effects, you'd emphasize the safety profile.
It's all about addressing their specific needs.
And then, for those low potential but high adoption doctors,
The loyal but lower volume prescribers.
you'd probably focus on maintaining the relationship without overdoing it.
So maybe you send them regular updates and check in with them occasionally.
But you wouldn't necessarily bombard them with information or sales calls.
It's about being respectful of their time and not overwhelming them.
And for the last group, those low potential, low adoption doctors,
The ones who aren't really your target audience right now.
you'd probably keep them on your radar, but not invest a ton of resources,
So maybe you add them to your mailing list and send them occasional updates.
just in case they become more relevant to your marketing efforts down the line.
Makes sense. It's all about being strategic and making the most of your resources.
Exactly. And this whole process of segmentation and persona development is key to making that happen.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We've gone from understanding the unique challenges of pharma marketing to diving deep into segmentation and building those doctor personas.
And we've even touched on some of the real-world tactics that pharma companies use to reach those doctors.
But I have a feeling we're about to enter a whole new realm.
Oh, what's next?
Remember how we mentioned AI at the beginning?
Right, that AI could suggest the best ways to connect with each doctor.
Well, buckle up, because it's about to get futuristic.
Okay, I'm ready for the next level.
Let's talk about how AI is starting to revolutionize the world of pharma marketing.
It really is amazing to think about just how much AI could change how pharma companies do marketing.
Oh yeah, AI has the potential to just totally shake things up. But
But what?
before we go full on sci-fi,
Yeah.
you mentioned this thing called RCPA
Mm-hmm.
earlier, and the professor made it sound super important for gathering data.
Oh, yeah, RCPA, that stands for Retail Chemist Prescription Audit.
Retail chemist prescription audit. Okay, so can you break that down for us? What is it exactly?
Sure. So RCPA, it's basically a way for pharma companies to kind of see what's happening in the real world, like what doctors are actually prescribing.
Okay, but how does that actually work? I'm picturing people with clipboards counting pills at the pharmacy.
Well, it's not quite like that, but they do have these teams that go out and visit pharmacies.
Okay, so they are actually going out there in person.
Yep. And they're specifically focusing on pharmacies that are near a target doctor's office.
Oh, I see. So they're trying to see how many prescriptions for a certain drug are being filled at those pharmacies.
Exactly. It's like getting a real-time snapshot of prescribing patterns.
And that helps them estimate a doctor's prescribing volume for certain products.
Right. And they can also track how those patterns change over time.
But hold on a sec. Doesn't that raise some privacy concerns?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Patient privacy is super important, and pharma companies know that.
So how do they make sure they're not, snooping into people's personal medical information?
Well, the data they collect through RCPA, it's all aggregated,
Aggregated meaning?
meaning they're not looking at individual prescriptions tied to specific patients.
So it's more about seeing the overall trends in prescribing behavior for a certain area or a doctor's practice.
Right, they're looking at the big picture, not the individual details.
So it's like they're blurring out the names and personal information.
Exactly. It's all anonymized and used to understand those market dynamics.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
Mm.
I mean, it's good to know they're taking privacy seriously.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So RCPA, it's definitely an interesting method.
Yeah.
But the professor also emphasized that it's increasingly being complemented by digital data sources.
Right, because like we were saying earlier, everything's going digital, and the pharma industry is no exception.
So what kind of digital data are we talking about here?
Well, there's a ton of information available from online pharmacies and electronic health records.
Oh, wow. Yeah, those electronic health records, they have so much information.
It's like a gold mine for pharma marketers.
But I imagine it can be overwhelming to sift through all that data.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's where data analytics and AI come in.
AI can help make sense of all that information,
And turn it into actionable insights.
which is ultimately what it's all about, right?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, you want to use those insights to create a better experience for both doctors and patients.
Okay, so we've talked about how pharma companies are gathering all this data,
Yeah.
but I'm curious about the actual marketing side of things.
Right. How do they use this data to connect with doctors in a meaningful way?
Exactly, because it's not just about sending out generic emails or brochures anymore.
Nope. You got to be much more strategic and targeted with your approach.
In one of the articles we have, it talks about how the pandemic really forced the pharma industry to step up its digital game.
Oh, yeah, that IQVIA article, they highlighted how companies had to find new ways to engage with doctors online.
Because those in-person visits were no longer an option.
Exactly. So they had to get creative.
So what did they come up with?
Well, they started using a wider range of digital channels like virtual meetings, webinars, online platforms.
It's like they had to create a whole new digital playbook.
And the key was to create content that was actually engaging and valuable for doctors.
So it couldn't just be like, here's some information about our drug.
Nope. They had to go beyond that.
They had to offer something that would actually benefit doctors in their practice.
Right. Things like clinical trial updates, expert insights, practical tips and tools.
So it's about providing real value, not just pushing products.
Exactly. And as AI becomes more sophisticated, it can actually help personalize that content even further.
Well, that's interesting. How so?
Well, AI can analyze a doctor's online behavior, their prescribing patterns, their past interactions with the company.
And then use all that information to create a truly customized experience.
Right. It's like having a marketing algorithm that knows exactly what each doctor wants to see.
That's pretty amazing.
But even with all this amazing technology, we can't forget about the human element.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Doctors are still people, and relationships matter a lot in this industry.
Absolutely. And one of the articles really hammered that home.
Which one was that?
The PwC article.
Oh, yeah. They talked about the importance of combining data-driven insights with a deeper understanding of doctor personas.
Right. You got to go beyond just the numbers.
It's not enough to know that a doctor prescribes a lot of a certain type of drug.
You also need to understand their motivations, their concerns, their overall approach to patient care.
And that's where those doctor personas come in handy.
Exactly. They help you paint a more complete picture of each doctor as a person.
Okay, I'm getting a much clearer picture now.
Good.
But I'm still curious about the practical side of things.
Like how all of this actually translates into a real-world marketing plan?
Exactly. If I'm a pharma marketing manager, what does my day-to-day actually look like?
Well, think of it this way. You've got your segmentation matrix, which tells you which doctors have the highest potential in adoption for your products. You've developed your doctor personas, which give you insights into their motivations and preferences.
Right.
Now you need to use all that information to create a targeted marketing plan.
So it's like creating a roadmap for how to engage with each doctor.
Exactly. And that roadmap will look different for each segment.
Can you give me some examples?
Sure. So for those high-value doctors, those superstars in the potential high adoption segment, you might go all out with a multi-channel approach.
Multi-channel
Meaning you're using a variety of channels to reach them.
So emails, phone calls, virtual meetings, maybe even some in-person visits.
Exactly. You want to build a strong relationship with these doctors and keep them engaged with your brand.
And for the other segments, you'd adjust your strategy based on their specific needs and preferences, right?
Absolutely. So for a doctor who prefers digital communication and is known for embracing new treatments.
You might focus on sending them targeted content through email and online platforms.
Right. And for a doctor who's more traditional and prefers face-to-face interactions, you might prioritize in-person visits and invitations to local conferences.
It's all about being strategic and using the right mix of channels for each doctor.
Precisely.
This is making so much more sense now.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
But I have to ask, where does AI fit into all of this?
Ah, yes, AI.
You mentioned it could actually suggest the next best action for engaging with doctors.
That's where things get really interesting.
I'm all ears. Tell me more about this next best action concept.
Well, it's all about using AI to make those marketing decisions even smarter and more effective. So this next best action, it's like AI is telling you exactly what to do and when to do it.
Oh, wow. So instead of like relying on their gut feeling or blasting out the same message to everyone, pharma companies can have this AI-powered assistant guiding their every move.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like having a super smart marketing guru who just knows exactly how to reach each doctor.
But how does it actually work? Like, what kind of information is the AI looking at?
Well, it takes into account a ton of data about each doctor, like their specialty, their prescribing history, what communication channels they prefer, even their past interactions with the pharma company.
Wow, so it's really building a comprehensive profile of each doctor.
Yeah, and then it crunches all that data and suggests the next best action.
Okay, so what might that action be?
Well, it could be a lot of things. It might be sending a personalized email or scheduling a virtual meeting. Or maybe it suggests that a sales rep should drop off some samples at the doctor's office?
So it's really about tailoring the approach to each individual doctor.
Exactly. And the AI learns over time, too.
Oh, that's interesting. So it gets even smarter with each interaction.
Yep. The more data it has, the better it gets at predicting what will be most effective.
That's pretty amazing. It's like the AI is constantly optimizing the marketing strategy.
Exactly. And the IQVIA article, they highlighted how this level of personalization leads to much higher engagement from doctors.
Which ultimately means better results for everyone.
Absolutely.
But this whole thing makes me wonder about the human side of things. Like, are sales reps and those medical science liaisons just going to become obsolete?
It's a valid question. A lot of people are worried about AI taking over their jobs.
Right. But I think it's important to remember that AI is a tool, not a replacement for human interaction.
Exactly. It can handle a lot of the data analysis and recommendations, but it's still humans who build those relationships.
And answer those complex questions that AI just can't handle.
Right. AI can't replace that personal touch that's so crucial in healthcare.
So it's more about AI enhancing those human interactions.
Yeah, making them even more effective.
It's like AI can do all the heavy lifting when it comes to data analysis.
And that frees up those sales reps and medical science liaisons to focus on what they do best.
Like building rapport with doctors and having those in-depth conversations.
Exactly. It's about creating a powerful partnership between human expertise and AI-driven intelligence.
That's a great way to put it. And as future business leaders, it's important to understand these trends.
Right, because AI is going to play a bigger and bigger role in pretty much every industry.
Absolutely. Well, this deep dive has been incredible.
I agree. It's been a wild ride.
We've gone from the basics of pharma marketing all the way to the mind-blowing possibilities of AI.
And we've learned how these companies are using data and technology to connect with doctors in a more meaningful way.
And ultimately help patients get the treatments they need.
That's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into pharma marketing.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, stay curious and never stop learning, because the future is full of exciting possibilities.